Welcome back, everyone. This concludes our section on how to design and implement an Azure Virtual WAN architecture. Before we move on to the next section, let's quickly review the main topics we talked about in this one. We started off with a high-level overview of Azure Virtual WAN concepts, in which we learned that a virtual WAN is essentially a managed hub and spoke infrastructure that automates a lot of the manual hub and spoke process for you. We discussed the main components, which include the hub, which is the core of our virtual WAN implementation, and of course our different virtual network and hybrid connections as well. And we also discussed how transitive networking works with the standard SKU, which makes that possible. And we also talked about the differences between the two virtual WAN SKUs as well. We then moved on to a discussion of how routing works within an Azure Virtual WAN virtual hub, in which we talked about the concepts of route association and propagation, the default routing stance of any-to-any routing, which essentially lets everyone talk to everyone else. And we also learned how to incorporate custom routes, which take priority over your default route table. And of course, custom routes are useful in scenarios in which we want to implement network virtual appliances and also isolate different networks from the rest of our virtual WAN implementation. We then went into a discussion on how to integrate virtual WAN with different hybrid networks, which focus on our main scaling component of scale units, which is essentially a SKU that determines the aggregate bandwidth of different hybrid connections, the breakdown of which is very important, and which are different site-to-site or point-to-site VPN scale units clocked in at 500 megabits per second each, whereas a scale unit for an express route circuit was 2 gigabits per second each. And we also talked about the site-to-site connection process, in which we start by creating a VPN site configuration, connect to our local site, and then once our configuration is complete, we download and import that configuration into our local VPN device to complete that connection. Last main topic that we discussed, apart from a demonstration, was focusing on how to integrate the Azure Firewall service or select third-party network virtual appliances with Azure Virtual WAN, in which we reviewed that a hub is a really great place to deploy some sort of a centralized network appliance. We then talked about how to integrate third-party network virtual appliance installations, which were available from select partners, and they were roughly broken down into SD-WAN and different security offerings. And we also discussed how we can deploy the first-party Azure Firewall service directly into our hub as well. And like I just mentioned, all of these different options are directly implemented on a hub-by-hub basis. That's going to go ahead and wrap up this section on virtual WAN. Let's now move on to the next one.